Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to all of you for being here today. What a great day. As a former astronaut myself, it's quite an honor to kick off this administration's first meeting of the National Space Council and to introduce Vice President Harris. I'll never forget getting out of my seat on my first space flight in 2001 and looking out the window for the very first time. You see the Earth as this big round ball just floating there in the blackness of space, and you immediately get this sense how we are all in this together. And I know that everybody in this room understands how important space will be for the United States in the 21st century. Commercial activities in low Earth orbit already form the bedrock of a number of critical industries. Space also represents the high ground for future combat operations. And as we've seen in recent weeks and months, the threats of U.S. national security and commercial assets in space are real. And these threats will undoubtedly grow in the years to come, which is why it is critical that we maintain our competitive edge over our adversaries. And as our nation looks to confront some of the most serious scientific challenges of our time, from advanced medical research to understanding the causes and effects of global climate change, space-based scientific research is crucial. Lastly, and this is something that's very important to me personally, Space exploration has an incredible capacity to inspire future generations. I remember being a young kid during the Apollo program and trying and failing to stay awake in our living room to watch Neil and Buzz walk on the moon on Apollo 11. But after I woke up and realized what happened, their example served as an inspiration for my brother and for me and played a big role in our goal to become astronauts. And I know that seeing the first American woman and the first American of color set foot on the moon as part of the first Artemis mission will do more than any of us could ever hope in terms of inspiring a generation of Americans from all backgrounds to pursue careers in science, math, engineering, and technology. The National Space Council has the unique ability to bring the entire federal government together to address these pressing challenges and many more. So I want to thank this administration for their commitment to retaining the National Space Council to ensure that this important interagency forum exists to confront our country's most pressing space challenges. Now, it's an honor to introduce my friend, Chair of the National Space Council, Vice President Kamala Harris. Let me just finish by saying Vice President Harris's role leading the Space Council demonstrates her and this administration's commitment to space. Her leadership on space on the world stage and here in the U.S. has been and will continue to be incredibly impactful for future and current generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Thank you. Please have a seat. Senator, I just have to say about you, the president feels this way, our nation feels this way. You have dedicated yourself to our nation with such courage, such commitment, and such patriotism. And I thank you for the introduction and your life of service. Thank you. And to everyone, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I want to first thank the United States Institute of Peace for hosting us today. And thank you to everyone for joining this inaugural meeting of our National Space Council. This council has the important responsibility to synchronize our nation's civil, commercial, and national security space activities. And gathered here is the largest and most expansive space council in our nation's history. Today, President Joe Biden issued an executive order to renew this council and to add 5 new members. And they are here today: the Secretary of the Interior, the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of Education, and our National Climate Advisor. The broad membership of this council reflects our broad priorities as an administration. And also here today are members of Congress from both chambers, as well as Admiral Jim Ellis, who serves as chair of the Users Advisory Group. And I thank all of you for your participation and your leadership, and welcome to all. Astronauts have said that seeing Earth from space for the first time, like Senator Kelly described, is awe-inspiring and clarifying. In that moment, it becomes abundantly clear how precious our Earth is, and how connected we all who occupy space on this Earth, how connected we are. The vision, they say, is so powerful that it produces an effect which has actually been given a name: the overview effect. One astronaut from the Apollo 8 mission explained, while the crew's initial focus was on the moon, in the end, it was equally important to look back at Earth. Today, our nation and our world is more active in space than ever before, with satellites in orbit that provide services and security to people here on Earth, with a thriving commercial enterprise, with the International Space Station among the brightest objects in our sky, and with the Artemis program, which is helping our nation achieve new heights. And while our exploration of space takes us up to the moon, to Mars, to the edge of our solar system, like the Apollo 8 crew, I believe we have a responsibility to also look to our home planet. In this new era, we must see all the ways in which space can benefit Earth. We must see all the ways in which space can benefit the people of our nation and of all humanity. This perspective is central to our work as a council, because while exploration of space defined the 20th century, the opportunity of space must guide our work in the 21st. And that is why the first order of business today is to release our Space Priorities Framework. Our priorities, as I mentioned, are broad, as is our framework. Our framework covers many areas in which space activity is a source for American leadership and strength, and American innovation and opportunity. At this meeting this afternoon, we will focus on 3 particular areas within our framework. And the 3 areas, I believe, demonstrate our administration's vision and our mission. 3 areas in which I believe we will make significant progress. 1, building our STEM workforce. 2, addressing the climate crisis. 3, promoting rules and norms that govern space. So first, on STEM. I have visited several college campuses over the years, including this year I visited Hampton University, an HBCU in Virginia. Hampton University hosts a NASA mission, the AIM satellite mission. The students there are scientists, and they are working with scientists to track atmospheric changes. And I'll tell you something about these students. They are both inspired and inspiring. And so we must ensure that more of our nation's students have access to these important opportunities. We must encourage more of our students to pursue STEM careers. The truth is, the United States used to lead, I said past tense, used to lead the world on innovation. But right now, our nation is falling behind as others develop their STEM workforce. To compete in the 21st century, to keep our nation secure in the 21st century, our nation must invest in more scientists, more engineers, more programmers. We must, it is an imperative, build a strong STEM workforce. And I've seen with my own eyes how space can help us reach that goal. From the elementary school student with a telescope to the college student analyzing satellite data, to the trades apprentice who is learning skills to help build rockets. So today, as a council, we will discuss how we can strengthen space policy and how we can partner with union leaders and business leaders and educators to build the workforce that will solve the challenges of our time. And that brings me to our second area of focus today, the challenge of our climate crisis. The AIM satellite mission at Hampton University is one of the many that is measuring the impact of the climate crisis. I was recently at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, and I was honored to be the first to view images from the satellite that has been named Landsat 9. These are but two examples of the fleet of satellites and sensors we have as a nation that provides citizens and scientists with the data they need to mitigate and adapt to the impact of the climate crisis. Just think, these satellites provide real-time images of the landscape of our nation. As natural disasters increase in frequency and ferocity around our country, these images are being used by first responders. These images are being used by farmers to assess their crops as drought and heat threatens their livelihood, threatens our ability to produce food as a nation, and by scientists who are working to combat the climate crisis head on. Today, this Council will commit to make this data more accessible to more people, and we will expand our global partnerships to increase the data we are able to collect. Last month, I announced that the United States will join the Space Climate Observatory. That's an international initiative that's being led by France to support climate action to local communities. The work of our Council will build on these types of partnerships, which lead, then, to the third focus of today, probably one of the most important in terms of our nation's leadership around the world, and that is how our nation can lead in our world to establish, to expand, and to accelerate the rules and the norms that govern space. Over the past weeks and months, I've spoken with heads of state and governments about our priorities in space. Leaders of France, India, Japan, Mexico, Singapore, among others. In these conversations, the opportunity of space has been clear, as has the risk. Without clear norms for the responsible use of space, we stand the real risk of threats to our national and global security. Just last month, we saw what can happen. Russia launched an anti-satellite missile to destroy one of its satellites. By blasting debris across space, this irresponsible act endangered the satellites of other nations, as well as astronauts in the International Space Station. As activity in space grows, we must reaffirm, yes, the rights of all nations, and we must demand responsibility from all spacefaring nations. We must establish and expand rules and norms on safety and security, on transparency and cooperation, to include military, commercial, and civil space activity. As but one example, the United States has led the development of the Artemis Accords to establish clear norms for civil space exploration. 13 nations have signed on so far. From here, we must work to expand the number of signatories on the Artemis Accord. In my recent meetings with the presidents of France and Mexico, both nations have indicated their intention to join. So, promoting rules and norms, addressing the climate crisis, building on our STEM workforce. These are the three areas of priority for this Council that will guide our work today. And there are many more that this Council will address in the days and the weeks and the months ahead. So keeping that in mind, I will conclude with this. The astronauts who have returned home from space, they describe with wonder a new awareness of not only what is out there, but what's right here. Looking at Earth from hundreds of thousands of miles away, they see what I know we all know. Our planet is fragile. Our planet is beautiful. And it is filled with billions of people who are at once different and the same. From space, all of humanity is one. And through our work in space, we have an opportunity to benefit not only the American people, but all of humanity. Our framework is therefore comprehensive. Our agenda, yes, our agenda is ambitious. But as an astronaut once told me about the advice he received ahead of his first spacewalk, he was told, simple, just focus on what's right in front of you, and from there, widen your view. That, my friends, is how we will move forward. Focused on what is in front of us and widening our view and expanding our work as we go forward. So again, I thank you all for being here, and let's now get into our agenda. Thank you all. So to begin, we will start with our first panel, which will be to discuss the norms and rules. And we have many extraordinary American leaders who are the members of the President's Cabinet who are here taking a role of leadership, not only in this discussion, but as heads of their agencies on the work ahead and the commitments that we are prepared to make today and going forward. So the first topic on norms and rules is essentially how do we modernize the norms and rules that govern space. So we know from Apollo 8, from previous missions, space exploration is not new. But we are in a new era where we are, I think, more than ever before, appreciating the capacity and, yes, the opportunity. So on this topic, let's consider the challenges that are also presented, in addition to the opportunities. The challenges, for example, being congestion, debris, and threats, including the need to de-escalate threats through deconfliction and ensuring that we are all working with the same norms and rules so that we don't compromise the safety or integrity of any of our missions because of confusion coming out of a lack of rules and norms that govern the road. So with that, I'm going to introduce Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. The Department of Commerce has made a new mandate to provide space situational awareness data and space traffic management to the nation and the world. And so, Secretary Raimondo, I'd like to start by asking you, given this mandate and an open data system that can merge commercial along with military data in a way that is then an open data system so that it's not only integrated and synchronized, but available to the public, how are you thinking about the plan of rollout?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice President, and thank you, most important, for your leadership in this area, which is, as you said, so vital to our national security and also our economic security. I also want to extend my appreciation to all of you and to the members of the National Space Council present today and to the members of Congress and other distinguished guests who are here. So, as you say, commerce is not always necessarily thought of as the space agency. However, we do play an important role in space, particularly on the space economy and U.S. commercial space industry. Our work at the Commerce Department, and I'm joined here by Dr. Spinrad, who runs NOAA, covers climate and weather data services, space safety and sustainability, workforce development that the Vice President just spoke of, manufacturing, and management of the nation's radio frequency spectrum. We're also involved in standard setting, cybersecurity, export controls, and promoting space exports around the world, which is, of course, an increasing area of our economy. And we lead in these areas because space is directly tied to our economic security and our global competitiveness. Within the Department of Commerce, we have the Office of Space Commerce. And the work there is central, and we plan in this administration, under the President's leadership and Vice President's leadership, to have the Office of Space Commerce play an even greater and more robust role in the interagency process as we shape space policy and space strategy. As Vice President just said, the recent Russian anti-satellite test was absolutely a wake-up call for all of us, and its potential impacts to space safety and sustainability highlight the importance of the work we're doing in the Office of Space Commerce. All of the work we're doing in the Office of Space Commerce will support space traffic coordination, as you just asked about. Presently, building on the strong foundation established by the Department of Defense, the Office of Space Commerce developed, at the request of Congress, a prototype space situational awareness system to support civil and commercial space operations. And we are now deeply in the process of preparing for an operational system from the prototype in collaboration with our interagency partners and, importantly, in collaboration with the commercial industrial space sector. And that, over the next several years, we believe we will be able to make that leap between the prototype and the commercial system, which will be incredibly important for space traffic and coordination.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And to emphasize the importance of the role of the Department of Commerce, and I'm going to next introduce the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Between the two agencies, we cover launch and then activity in space and the coordination. You may think of it like historically how you think of the FAA and the regulation of traffic. Well, similar adoption of policy and coordination must take place in a very coordinated way within our government as it relates to activity in space. So thank you, Madam Secretary. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you for the work that the department is doing, and in particular, again, the Department of Transportation has a role to regulate space launch activity. And so my question to you is, given that role and given also the rapidity at which the technology is evolving, how is the department thinking about updating and upgrading its rules of the road around regulation of space launch?
Well, thank you, Madam Vice President, first of all, for your leadership of this body and in this area. We're thrilled to be with our colleagues and such a distinguished audience. As you say, this is about coordinating the launch and reentry processes. One way we think of it is if orbit is to be thought of as the beltway, we're particularly concerned with the on-ramps and the off-ramps, launch and reentry. So the department right now is addressing this through new regulations that became effective in March of this year, which enhance the requirements to avoid collisions with other objects during commercial launches and reentries, and to prevent the creation of new debris during those phases of flight. Building on that, for the immediate future, the department's going to be addressing safety and sustainability through a new regulation on orbital debris mitigation. So the idea, which we hope to be ready to propose in spring of 2022, is to make sure we're not creating unnecessary debris that would inhibit future space operations, and that we have means to take care of what is placed into orbit. So this FAA orbital rule would apply strictly to commercial launches, but it would be informed by NASA documentation to inform that regulation. And throughout the process, we're harmonizing with international entities through the Interagency Space Debris Coordinating Committee, which is one reason why we're so pleased to see so many international partners represented here. And we want to explore policy that will limit the non-functional items that are allowed into space in the first place, trying to take a broader view on all of the different implications of not just the launch process, but our spaceports as well. You noted the rapid increase in activity, and just to put that in perspective, we've seen the number of launches double even after the previously record-breaking numbers last year when it came to commercial space travel. And we're actually getting close to the point where we will see more commercial launches on an annual basis than what we were accustomed to seeing over the course of about a decade. So we are gearing up, and it's very much the right time, I think, for this body to be playing that coordinating role that you mentioned that's so important, and we're looking forward to carrying on that work.
Thank you. And can't emphasize enough the importance of the Department of Transportation of the United States being a leader, not only in what we do in terms of our activity as a nation, but really coordinating and helping to set the global standards for space launch, but also for the activity that relates to debris and congestion and all of that. So thank you, Mr. Secretary. Next, I want to ask Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman to discuss a bit about how we are coordinating. Where is Wendy?
There you are. Hi.
I knew you were here. About how we are thinking about, again, as a transition from Secretary Buttigieg to you, the role of our State Department as it relates to the coordination with our partners, with our allies, and even sometimes with our adversaries, and how we are bringing folks together. And I mentioned the conversations that I've had with various heads of state and government heads, but how, in particular, is the State Department leading the effort to strengthen and expand these alliances and partnerships, and in particular, if you can emphasize the Artemis Accord and the leadership role you've taken there?
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you to all who have joined, including those who are joining from all around the world.
That's right. In
this discussion. The Department of State leads U.S. government engagements with other nations, many of whom are here today, to promote shared norms of responsible behavior and the long-term sustainability of outer space activities grounded in the 1967 Outer Space Treaty and related core treaties, conventions, and agreements. A major effort of the Department, along with NASA, is the expansion, as you said, Madam Vice President, the Artemis Accords, which provide basic principles to guide the next generation of civil exploration of outer space as we go to the moon and onwards to Mars. The Accords are this generation's recommitment to the principles of the Outer Space Treaty, envisioning a safe, transparent, peaceful, and prosperous approach to exploration, science, and commercial activities in space. Throughout all our work on sustainability, we promote the effective implementation of best practices, standards, and norms of responsible behavior for the full range of governmental and private sector space activities. Within the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, the Department worked collaboratively for 10 years to develop the 21 guidelines on long-term sustainability via consensus among nearly 100 member states. These voluntary and non-legally binding guidelines address key U.S. objectives, such as national-level policy regulatory frameworks for commercial space activities, safety of space operations, scientific research and development, and effective international cooperation. We're now focused on the widespread implementation of these 21 guidelines and continue to lead U.S. participation in follow-on LTS working group, which addresses the implementation of guidelines, capacity building, and studying other challenges to space sustainability. As has been mentioned, with respect to the growing threats to outer space activities, such as Russia's recent irresponsible anti-satellite weapons test, the United States co-sponsored a United Nations General Assembly resolution that for the first time ever will create a UN-led process to develop ideas for those national security space norms of behavior that we've been discussing today. This is also something that we bring up in my own strategic stability dialogue with the Russians and our ongoing dialogues with countries all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And that actually is a great segue into the discussion with the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kath Hicks. So on that point about the most recent anti-satellite test and this destructive nature of it, I think in many ways it has been a moment for us to really see very clearly what can happen and what potentially can be avoided with norms and rules. And so if you could, Madam Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kath Hicks, talk about how the Department of Defense views what we can do to reduce the risk of inadvertent conflict because of potential miscalculation based on misinterpretation of intentions in space, which we know can always lead to very undesirable consequences and are avoidable at the same time.
Certainly, Madam Vice President, and first let me thank you for your continued focus on space norms. It's so important, just as you said, to reduce the risks of inadvertent escalation and misunderstanding, which can expand beyond the space domain. So that really requires a shared understanding of what we're trying to do in terms of responsible behavior in space. And as a military organization and one of the world's most experienced and largest space operators, DoD knows it has a special responsibility to articulate what we mean by responsible behavior and then to reflect those values in how we actually operate. So Secretary of Defense Austin, beginning last July, set forth very publicly long-standing operational practices that we have in space to really demonstrate direction to our space operators. And those 5 tenets are to operate in, from, to, and through space with due regard to others and in a professional manner, to limit the generation of long-lived debris, to avoid the creation of harmful interference, to maintain safe separation and safe trajectory, and to communicate and make notifications to enhance the safety and stability of the domain. We use those tenets for conversations on space norms, much as the State Department does, in multilateral fora with defense counterparts worldwide, and of course, as I said, to guide our own activities. The Russia destructive anti-satellite tests just conducted really demonstrates the potential deadly effects if tenets like this are not widely shared. In that case, we've seen significant amounts of hazardous debris created that can threaten and could still threaten the lives of those space travelers who are in low Earth orbit. And that risk will continue for years with space assets that are vital to all nations' interests. Such a display of deliberate disregard for safety, stability, security, and sustainability in space is one to be condemned and underscores the urgency of acting in defense of developing shared norms and having long-term sustainability of outer space. So from the Defense Department's perspective, we would like to see all nations agree to refrain from anti-satellite weapons testing that creates debris, which, as you've mentioned, pollutes the space environment, risks damaging space objects, and threatens the lives of current and future space explorers.
Thank you. And thank you and to the Secretary for the work that you all have been doing in your role of leadership. It's been extraordinary. And these last few in particular lead up to a conversation with our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. You have enormous responsibilities, and I thank you for your extraordinary service. And on the issue of space, the role of the National Security Advisor and your office really is, as it is with many other issues, to coordinate among these various agencies. So can you talk a bit about the key security agencies that you always bring together and will bring together around this issue, and what is the value in particular of convening these agencies on the issue of international norms and rules, all with a mind toward the priority of national security?
Thank you, Madam Vice President, and thanks to colleagues and teammates and to partners from many countries that I see represented here today. And Madam Vice President, in particular, thank you for your leadership in driving the Space Priorities Framework, which I think took your advice in widening the view, or I guess it was the advice really of the person talking to the spacewalker. I think the way in which you've expanded this very council answers the question about why coordination is so important, because the sheer number of stakeholders who come into play on the question of dealing with space governance and space norms is so broad it cuts across the national security and civilian space. It cuts across public and private. It cuts across countries. It cuts across civil society. It cuts across rules and norms and interests and values. And from the National Security Council's perspective, we will work closely with the National Space Council to coordinate U.S. activities to strengthen global governance for space. Over the past few years, the international community, through work at the United Nations and elsewhere, has made progress in developing norms to strengthen the safety and sustainability of space activities. But frankly, we've fallen short in addressing the risks of inadvertent conflict arising from growing national security activities in space. You've heard from many people on this stage about the irresponsible and dangerous debris-generating weapons testing. If we were to allow that to continue, we risk allowing military activities in space to undermine the peaceful use of space by all. So building on the work that you just heard from both the Department of State and the Department of Defense, the National Security Council will focus initially on developing new proposals for international norms that contribute to stability and security in space while also protecting the space environment. And in part, that's about making sure that we ensure legitimate national security space activities do not undermine strategic stability between nations. It also means working very closely with the civilian side of the space equation so that we responsibly govern private sector space activities, which are now increasingly at the forefront of global innovation in space. So we look forward to developing our ideas in coordination with our international partners. We look forward to continuing to exercise the muscle of establishing the alliances, institutions, agreements, and norms that have underwritten the international order here on Earth and that can help sustain a stable and open international system that extends to space as well. And so I look forward to working under your leadership, Madam Vice President, working with my colleagues here on stage, working with our partners around the world in this endeavor as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So in conclusion for this first panel, I'll just point out that obvious priorities are that we increase safety as it relates to space traffic, and that we do that in a number of ways. That includes what we've heard about, everything from coordination around launch to the air traffic control piece. There is also the priority that we have as a council and as an administration to promote safe commercial activity. That is about encouraging and recognizing the importance of an investment in innovation, which also relates to growing the creation of jobs in our country, very important jobs. And then, of course, there is the point that has been raised by everyone on the panel around the issue of leading globally, of working diplomatically with our allies, with our partners, and where there is potential for coordination and collaboration with some who have been our adversaries to, again, reach a common language and certain standards or rules of the road so that we can ensure that at the very least we avoid conflict that is unintended, but the result of a misinterpretation of intentions. So as we move forward, there's a lot of opportunity here as it relates to commercial space. In particular, the Department of Commerce, as Secretary Raimondo has outlined, is going to provide a plan of action to accelerate the development of space traffic management services. The Department of Transportation, Secretary Buttigieg, has been doing the work of continuing to streamline launch regulations to ensure safety, and also to work with the State Department to promote common standards that are global standards. On the issue of civil space, meaning space in the civilian sector, that is about the Department of State working with NASA to expand participation in the Artemis Accords. And then on the issue of national security, as you've heard, and Jake Sullivan talked about this, but it's DOD, it's the Department of State, it's DNI, and the National Security Council to develop a national security perspective on what should be the international rules and norms. And then finally, the National Space Council staff, which I have to thank for the extraordinary work that you all have been doing, will build basically an overarching plan to synchronize and coordinate these rules and norms as we go forward. So with that, why don't we start the second panel? the climate crisis, and what we have as an imperative to do, to acknowledge our role, our responsibility, but also the opportunity that we have through space exploration to do something about this in a way that has a direct impact, in a way that is a benefit to the people of our country and the people around the globe. President Biden has made very clear that we will have an all-of-government approach to this issue, and that we will better leverage our space capacities to, in particular, highlight the significance of the data that we collect, and do that in a way that makes certain that it is available to the public, that is synchronized and coordinated in a way that all can benefit, both within the government but outside of the government. An example of the data that we are collecting that really is extraordinary is the work that I saw at NASA at the Goddard Space Flight Center. It's extraordinary what our scientists, our engineers are doing in terms of creating technology to do a heat map, to predict what weather and climate can do or might do that can either benefit or harm substantial interests that we have. They are collecting an enormous amount of data. But the importance of that data is only that we use it, and that everyone who can benefit from it has access to it, that everyone has the tools to access it, and that everyone has the skill set to actually analyze it in a way that can help them. So our focus on data really is not only on our potential to increase our capacity to collect it, but also what we must do more to make it accessible to a larger group of people and give the tools not only for the availability and access to the data, but the tools to analyze that data in a way that the various sectors of our country and our world can actually benefit from the information. So with that, Secretary Holland, I want to welcome you as a new member to the Council, the Department of Interior, and your role obviously includes many important areas of priority for us, but in particular, the department has the capacity to use space to provide cities and local jurisdictions with the best available science, particularly as it relates to the climate crisis. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, Madam Chair. I'm so honored to be here. Yes, the Department of the Interior greatly appreciates the opportunities to support the Biden administration's space priorities through our membership on the Council. We strive to use the best available science in all of our programs, and we look forward to continuing our close work with partner agencies on these important issues. The department, through the U.S. Geological Survey, which we have terrific scientists every single day, working very hard. They operate the Landsat satellites. And in September, I was very grateful to attend NASA's launch of Landsat 9, and we have already seen the first set of images, like the one behind me, that have come back to Earth. We're working closely with NASA on the final testing, and if all of that goes as we plan, Interior looks forward to taking over the controls of Landsat this coming January. Each day, Interior employees and people the world over make good use of the images of Earth from the Landsat satellites. These images provide a foundation for high-quality scientific information which enable Interior to honor our trust responsibilities to Indian tribes, manage our nation's lands and resources, protect our fish and wildlife, preserve our cultural heritage, respond to natural hazards, and fulfill our broader missions. Our partnership with NASA on the Landsat program has produced a 50-year record of images of the Earth's land surfaces, waters, and coastlines. These images inform tribal, state, local, and federal decision-making for sustainable resource management and economic development. The Landsat images tell the story of how our planet's landscapes change over time and how those changes affect people, animals, and our cultural resources. The images help us document the effects of climate change by demonstrating the effects of wildfires, droughts, coastal erosion, landslides, and other hazardous conditions that happen every year. Tribes and indigenous peoples across our nation and in other countries are often on the front lines of climate change. We all know that. Space-based Earth observations and measurements from the Landsat satellites are important tools for sustainable resource management, environmental restoration, and climate change mitigation. Earth observation data that are freely available to the public from the USGS, NASA, and NOAA satellites can bring the power of space technology down to the local level, advancing the educational and career prospects of traditional communities, especially when accompanied by adequate training and infrastructure. I was very pleased to meet Nikki Tooley, a young scientist from the Navajo Nation, who I met during the Landsat 9 launch in California that I mentioned earlier. Nikki is from the community of Blue Gap, Arizona, an area afflicted by extreme drought in recent years. Nikki is working on her PhD in environmental science using remote sensing satellite data to contribute to the Navajo Nation's decisions on effective water resource allocation and drought mitigation. Nikki is someone who has used the publicly available images from Landsat satellites to further her scientific career and help her home communities. Additionally, Nikki, working far from her community on the Navajo Nation, uses Landsat images of her home to feel close to her family and the teachings that have been handed down to her through the generations. In general, the images available to the public from the Landsat program are used widely in classrooms across the world to promote STEM education and make kids excited to learn about and help protect our beautiful planet. And that's really the key. We need to get kids excited about this because we're not going to be here forever. We're eager to hear more stories from people like Nikki, who use Earth observations to empower communities across our nation to achieve environmental and climate justice and tackle our common economic, educational, environmental, and climate challenges. Madam Chair, thank you for that opportunity to share some of what we're doing.
Thank you, and Madam Secretary, the work you are doing and the crossover nature of the work that everyone is doing is, I think, becoming obvious as this discussion continues, including the work that you are doing that will have a direct impact on our next subject, which is STEM. So thank you for that. Next, we have the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and Mr. Secretary, if you could talk a bit about how our activity in space is to the benefit of our farming and rural communities, and what you see as being the potential to assist them with the challenges that they face increasingly every year.
Madam Vice President, let me thank you for your leadership and for the President's leadership in giving USDA a seat at this important council. I think it recognizes the critical interface between global food security and nutrition security, worldwide climate, smart agricultural practices, climate change, and space is fully interlinked area of policy. Let me give you several examples. We've heard a lot about the Landsat satellite. Well, that imagery and location services is allowing American farmers to utilize climate-smart agricultural practices, precision agriculture. It will allow them to grow more with less land, less water, less inputs, and obviously less greenhouse gas emissions. I was surprised to know that USDA and NASA have over 120 projects working together across 4 separate mission areas on water management, real-time crop assessment, quantifying carbon storage and sequestration, remote assessment of plant health. All of this is going to allow U.S. agriculture to reach your goal and the President's goal of a net zero future and to lead the agricultural community in doing so. Let me also say that we're excited about the research that we're involved in. I'm particularly excited about the fact that we're going to be able to extend space travel with the research that we're doing. Genetic engineering growth promotion is allowing us, through innovation, to develop food products that can be grown in space and to allow our astronauts to be able to extend their trip. My favorite is the flowering palm tree that is going to continue to provide fruit production over the course of a number of years. Look, we look forward to the formation of this important council and the extension of it to include USDA. We appreciate your leadership, and we look forward to USDA playing an essential role.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I agree with you. The potential that we have to meet some of the long-standing generational challenges for our farmers and our rural communities with space exploration is really profound, because it is everything from, as you said, water policy, to what we can do to assist our farmers with information about not only mitigation but adaptation on the issue of the climate crisis and the rapidly changing climate. So thank you for that. And next, I'm going to move over to the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Ali Mayorkas, who is a very hardworking member of the President's Cabinet on many issues, but on this issue in particular, you run among many other priorities, FEMA. And if you could talk a bit about your approach and the department's approach to protecting communities from climate disasters and how the work that we are doing in space might assist you with that important mission.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Vice President, for the question, for convening this council, and for your leadership on so many critical issues. And thanks to everyone for participating today. Here's the short answer, is that space assets are quite vital to the Department of Homeland Security's ability to respond to disasters, bless you, and address the threat that climate change poses to the nation. For example, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, uses geospatial data to monitor extreme weather events and do predictive analysis of severe storms. This allows us to better prepare the public and enables us to deploy our resources and personnel swiftly and effectively before and after a major storm makes landfall. FEMA also employs space-based technology and data to map the risk of flooding nationwide. This past April, we announced a new pricing methodology for the National Flood Insurance Program called Risk Rating 2.0. It incorporates cutting-edge space-based technology and modeling to more accurately reflect an individual property's flood risk. In the process, our department and FEMA created a system that is better equipped for the stark reality of frequent flooding caused by climate change. This also addresses another top administration priority. It tackles long-standing inequities in flood insurance pricing by fixing a system in which policyholders with lower value homes pay more than they should, and policyholders with high value homes pay less. All of this is part of our department's recently issued strategic framework to address climate change, which recognizes the importance of utilizing climate-based science. As we take these steps, we must recognize another fact. We cannot tap into the vast potential of space-based data unless that data is trusted and secure. Our cybersecurity experts are working to protect our space systems by testing the resilience of our space assets, planning for disruptions to space data and services due to a degraded space environment, and preparing for any unexpected issues. Simply put, space is a key priority, and that is why we're currently updating our department's space policy, which will recognize all the ways in which space-based systems play a critical role in securing our homeland. We look forward to working with this council. Madam Vice President, and thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Next, we will hear from Secretary Jennifer Granholm, who runs the Department of Energy and is really, as a leader, on the forefront of so many of the biggest challenges, but also the opportunities that we face in terms of the work we can do together. On the issue of our national labs in particular, Madam Secretary, do you have thoughts about how we can make data more accessible and usable to a greater number of people? And I know this is part of your lifelong work, is to ensure that all people have access to information that helps them.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. Thank you for your leadership, Madam Vice President. Thank you all for being here today. It is really an honor to represent the Department of Energy on the National Space Council. First of all, Department of Energy has been working in the space science applications space for about 50 years. But one of our biggest contributions, it comes from the data processing capabilities of the 17 national laboratories. Just a few weeks ago, I visited Oak Ridge National Lab and got to see our nation's very first exascale computer, which is named Frontier. It solves calculations at 5 times the speed of yesterday's top computers. The reason why that is important, that supercomputing is a tool to analyze all the data that's being collected from these satellites and other means that you've just heard here, to be able to reflect back on Earth. What are the biggest problems we are experiencing, and how can our computing capabilities resolve those? To your point, let me give you a couple of examples. So at Los Alamos National Lab, researchers have developed these algorithms to make a better sense of the flood information that we get from satellites. So the algorithms merge a range of space-based data to produce this holistic picture of the changes that are occurring on Earth, on the ground, and that allows us to measure, for example, deforestation, gives us a better idea of where global carbon emissions stands. It allows us to track the extreme weather events created by those emissions. Similarly, at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, which I know you know well, we are now pairing these high-resolution satellite images with advanced computer modeling to track groundwater in California, which officials can then use to better manage the state's water resources. And we can also use space-based data to anticipate and react to immediate crises. So Pacific Northwest National Laboratory is leading an effort called Rapid Analytics for Disaster Response. They've got artificial intelligence crunching satellite and aerial data along with social media activity that they are putting together to forecast impacts on energy infrastructure like the transmission grid, which allows us to monitor threats from climate disasters and organize this whole of government approach to emergency responses. So we're already making good use of our national labs when it comes to space-based data, but as what I say, America's Solutions Department, we are eager to explore new avenues of research and innovation and relish the opportunity to working with this council.
Thank you, and for highlighting some of the jewels of our federal government and the investments that have been made over a very long period of time. Our national labs really are part of the real incredible work and innovation that we have produced as a nation. So thank you for that. Our National Climate Advisor is Gina McCarthy. And I want to thank you, Gina, for all of the work you do. You are a leader in the country, if not a global leader on the issue of climate. You've been banging the drum for quite some time, and finally more people are saying, oh, she was right, decades ago. I better start paying attention. So with that, I want to ask you, there's so much that you have to say, I know, but in particular, can you address the priority that I know you've had in your career to make sure that we include all communities, in particular those who are underrepresented, in the work that we are doing as a council and the work that we are doing as a nation, so that the data and the work is accessible to all people?
Well, first of all, thank you, Madam Vice President. If you're saying I'm incredibly persistent and obnoxious, I totally agree with you, as will all of my colleagues at this table. And thank you for all of your tremendous leadership. As you have heard, I think, from all of us at this point, that access to space and cutting Earth observation platforms are providing critically important climate data. In fact, the climate models that have confirmed the severity of our climate crisis are all based on multiple sources of information, ranging from ice core data to sea level measurements. But satellite-supplied data has been critical to confirm the true extent of the climate crisis we're facing, and even more importantly, to inform the solutions we can bring to the table. Space-based resources allow us to respond in real time to the impacts of climate that we cannot stop and must be prepared to face. Whether that means NOAA tracking hurricanes as they form, USDA spotting wildfires, USGS mapping the severity of droughts, or EPA tracking down methane leaks, or understanding the flow of harmful algal blooms and whose water resources are at risk next. Or DOE, helping to make solar project planning easier and solar energy generation more efficient and affordable to consumers. So thanks in part to satellites, both from the federal government and commercial industries, we have more data than ever before about the climate crisis, and that data will not only allow us to more fully understand the depth and breadth of the challenge that we're facing, but it'll also help us judge the effectiveness of the actions we are taking and the consequences of inaction. Only with this wealth of data can we truly find the path forward that will protect the future for our children and grandchildren and generations to come. I think the challenge before these agencies, along with other agencies on the President's National Climate Task Force, is really to make sure that the data we gather is put to use to inform our strategies and to design our tools that empower our states, tribes, and local communities. And to your point, Madam Vice President, especially the most disadvantaged and vulnerable communities who have constantly been hit the hardest by climate change because they've already been weakened by having to face too much environmental degradation and disinvestment. And it's these communities that need these answers. They need data-driven, science-based solutions, which is exactly what we're all talking about today. And this information is going to give them the opportunity to fully engage, to be fully supported, and fully invested, as other communities are, so they can build back better. And yes, I had to get that in, build back better in ways that are healthier, safer, more secure, and more resilient to the challenges ahead. Thank you again for your leadership, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. And yes, our Build Back Better agenda extends from Earth to space. There's no question. But I do want to emphasize or repeat what Gina just said about the importance of satellite data. One could argue that without the satellites, what would be happening to our climate would be happening to our climate. The significance of it is that it allows us to now confirm what we've been experiencing, what we've been knowing, what certain people have been talking about for a very long time that has not been given the priority that it now is receiving. But the data, so it allows us to confirm, it allows us to then judge our effectiveness, but it does also allow us then, with this satellite technology, with our work in space, to actually mitigate, to actually perhaps have a real substantial impact on the course of what is happening to our climate in a way that will benefit all people. I'm asking the Climate Policy Office and the Climate Policy Office under Gina's leadership has agreed in coordination with the Office of Science and Technology Policy and the Space Council staff to establish essentially a baseline of available space data and decision-making tools that are needed to tackle the climate crisis and to provide that information to all communities with a particular awareness of those who have not historically received this or have access to it or the tools to analyze this data. And the understanding and the work that they will do going forward is to then take this baseline and coordinate the development and implementation of an action plan to increase access to the data and to decision-making tools. I'm also asking the State Department to work with interagency partners to essentially develop a diplomatic approach that will expand the global leadership of the United States to strengthen our partnerships around the world using satellite data and the tools available to us. So I thank you all for the work and your commitments going forward. Our third and final subject for today is the issue of STEM and understanding the significance and importance of that to our capacity to explore space, but to do all that then space allows us to do in terms of all the areas that we have discussed, from national security to commercial activity to addressing the climate crisis. So our nation's strength on this issue, I do believe, is firmly grounded in our commitment or lack of commitment, but I believe our commitment to invest in STEM education. And I believe, frankly, that we will risk losing our competitive edge without a priority in that regard. So we are, as a council, prioritizing that as an issue, and thinking of it in a way that also really understands the beauty of space to inspire so many people to engage in the process of education through STEM, to do this important work that, again, is, as much as anything, the most noble work of improving the condition of humankind. So with that, I'm going to ask our Director of the National Intelligence, Avril Haines, to talk a bit about what kind of jobs, where is she? What kind of jobs, Director Haines, require a STEM education in a way that is designed to improve and enhance our nation's security and do the work that we must do and the work that you do leading intelligence communities.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President. It's really an honor to be here to represent the intelligence community, and particularly with some of my really wonderful colleagues, the Director of the NRO, Dr. Chris Scalise, and Admiral Sharp, Director of NGA, and our Space Executive. And really, it will come as a surprise to no one, I suspect, certainly not to you, that science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are absolutely critical to our work in the intelligence community generally, but especially when it comes to space. And what I thought I would do is just give some examples, as you indicate, really of the work that we're doing, which will only intensify as we work to support essentially the priorities framework that you've mentioned at the beginning of this discussion. So, of course, a major aspect of our work is focused on being the nation's ears and eyes in space, providing what we often refer to as domain awareness, and doing so allows us to support efforts to protect and defend U.S. and allied national security interests in space, which is fundamental to enabling the development and use of space for peaceful purposes, including a competitive and burgeoning U.S. commercial space sector. And as you know, there are serious and, as we've discussed, and growing threats in space that we're focused on, which include the development of anti-satellite weapons by both China and Russia. And we work with our colleagues across the government with agencies like the Commerce Department and also with the Department of Defense to assist in their efforts to address such threats to a domain that is fundamentally a source of innovation and opportunity for mankind. But what is perhaps less known is that the intelligence community has a history of working closely with academia and industry partners to use our capabilities and expertise to help solve scientific challenges facing our nation and the world. Challenges that are many of the priorities that you've mentioned, including, obviously, climate. Gina did. You've identified. And our efforts in space make it possible for us to provide critical information to those responding to natural disasters, to predict the impact of, as well as to devise ways of addressing, as you just noted, climate change, and to support the establishment of norms for sustainable space environment. And of course, all of this relies on our ability to recruit and retain STEM professionals, as without them, none of this would be possible. And for example, in 2015, when the United States assumed chairmanship of the Arctic Council, the United States made a concerted effort to enhance our understanding of the impact of climate change on the Arctic. And in that context, NGA collected with the National Science Foundation, the University of Minnesota's Polar Geospatial Center, with support from other academic and corporate partners, on a public-private initiative to produce high-resolution digital elevation models of the Arctic and Antarctic regions using unclassified, commercially procured optical stereo imagery, supercomputing, and open-source software. And the entire data set was made publicly available and released, and catapulted the Arctic region from one of the worst to one of the best mapped regions on Earth. And those are the kinds of projects we want to do going forward to support your initiative. Needless to say, these sorts of projects and the development of space systems more generally requires a highly technical workforce. But we also have found that it's a virtuous cycle, in a sense, as you mentioned. In other words, we found that giving students the opportunity to work on space systems tends to inspire them to pursue STEM fields of education. And to support increased participation in STEM fields, for example, NRO created an internship program that introduces students to the various aspects of space system development by assigning them to actual missions so they can gain experience and really feel the excitement of space development. Students have participated in mission design, orbit design, they have investigated advanced concepts, and even had a chance to support launches. It makes us all feel like we want to go be an NRO intern, I think. But NRO's partnership with NASA has expanded their intern program to allow students without clearances to experience space development firsthand and have the option of choosing NRO as their next experience once they have a clearance. And frankly, NASA has been a critical partner in our efforts across the board, as we both need rocket scientists, engineers, IT professionals, mathematicians, physicists, and so on. And in addition to recruitment efforts at higher educational institutions, we engage locally across the country at the elementary and the secondary schools levels to encourage at least an awareness of STEM, because we need people with degrees in all fields. And the more they're aware of STEM, the more able they are to contribute in a highly technical organization along the lines of what we've been discussing. Mm-hmm. So finally, I also want to stress that as we engage in recruitment and retention of STEM professionals, we are focused on diversity. We have expanded our outreach with colleges and universities with strong STEM programs that also are minority-serving institutions to diversify our recruiting pool, as this is an area where we just need to do better. Through our efforts, we hope to grow an increasingly diverse STEM community, and whether they work for the community, the intelligence community, or choose other organizations, doing so contributes to the overall U.S. economy, and these individuals will have relevant experience to support aerospace companies, IT organizations, academia, other high-tech organizations in general. But thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. The list that you provided us, I think, highlights also that when we think of STEM education in terms of the jobs that are necessary to support space activity, a lot of those jobs are here on Earth, so, which makes it exciting for those who may not want to fly. With that, let's move on to General Dickinson, who has been an extraordinary leader of the U.S. Space Command. And General, I'd like to ask you if you could discuss a bit about the fact that you require, and the Department of Defense requires, highly skilled individuals who are dedicated, who are disciplined, who are just courageous in an extraordinary way in terms of their service to our country and in service of our national security. Can you talk a bit about the significance of a STEM education to our uniformed military force?
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I'm honored today to sit here representing General Mark Milley, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in the administration's first meeting of the National Space Council. You know, there is no question that the nation as a whole must broaden the pipeline of STEM-capable Americans so that employers, including the armed services and the Department of Defense, can recruit the talent that we need to address tomorrow's challenges. Inherently, space is a technically challenging domain. Space specialists and operators require a thorough grasp of physics, mathematics, and unique environments to understand, protect, and operate in the space domain. It is critical to have a workforce with strong foundations in the STEM disciplines so we can protect and defend against existing and emerging threats to the space domain. And this joint force requirement extends across all the armed forces, all the combatant commands, and all the domains that we currently operate in: air, land, maritime, and in this case, space. It's a national security priority, I think, to protect the space domain from the disruptive and destructive actions by adversaries. These space missions rely heavily on STEM. Therefore, our workforce must bring that capability to the forefront and employ the next generation of diverse technical talent. We need STEM-savvy soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and guardians to meet this priority and successfully execute space missions on Earth, in orbit, and even beyond. U.S. Space Command and U.S. Space Force have initiated exciting new programs and tapped into existing programs that encourage STEM education and seed interest in future career STEM opportunities with the government. The U.S. Space Force recently launched the University Partnership Program to identify, develop, and retain a diverse STEM-qualified workforce to further its mission to secure the nation's interests and maintain its advantages in space. In addition, programs such as the DoD SMART program, Premier College Intern program, GSA's Digital Core Intern program, and the DoD Pathways program provide opportunities for STEM talent to get a foot in the door and a taste for future careers. We are committed to carrying this momentum forward through interagency exchange programs as future steps in strengthening national capability. The services and the Department of Defense are expanding outreach and engagement at the university level to encourage and inspire minds to pursue careers directly impacting our national interests. Again, Madam Vice President, I appreciate the opportunity today to comment on this important issue and the importance of STEM to our United States Armed Forces.
Thank you, General. And that's a great segue to our NASA Administrator, Bill Nelson. And I know the President talks often with me about your role of leadership for so many years and your consistency in terms of your enthusiasm about what we have yet to do and our capacity to get there. And so if you can talk a bit, Administrator Nelson, about the efforts in particular that NASA is taking on the issue of STEM and what you see as our challenges, but also our goal to increase and inspire the number of students who will pursue a STEM profession.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you for being an enthusiastic Vice President, which harkens back to President Johnson when he was Vice President, establishing the first National Space Council. And we know that that work took us to the moon successfully in a great space race. That was the Apollo generation. Now it is the Artemis generation. And the picture to your left is of Artemis 1 being stacked in the Vehicle Assembly Building. It is the most powerful rocket ever, 8.8 million pounds of thrust at launch. And it will take us back to the moon, as already has been stated here. And thank you to everybody, because you've told what NASA does. Particularly since we work with all of you. It will take us back to the moon, where we are going to learn how to exist for long duration under very hostile and adverse conditions in order to go with humans to Mars. Now, how this relates to STEM? Just look at the sparkle in the eyes of the kids when the topic of space and space flight opens up. It opens their little minds into wanting to get involved. And we saw that that was the case in the Apollo generation. For a couple of generations thereafter, look at the engineers and the mathematicians and the technicians that we had. And so NASA, like so many of you, and thank you for what you're doing, we have paid interns and fellowships. We get them in, we have them work with the NASA professionals. They bend hardware, they write code, they write all kinds of things, they do additive manufacturing, and as a result of that, 30% of our interns come to work for NASA. So STEM is so important, and it is not only a direct cause, it is also a result of our space program. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And this is a perfect segue to go to our Education Secretary, Miguel Cardona. And Mr. Secretary, in addition to the great potential that we have, as Administrator Nelson mentioned, to induce that sparkle in the eyes of our children and to let them know what we believe in them and what they can believe is possible. Can you talk a bit about the challenges within our educational system for all children to be able to have that opportunity to open their eyes and their minds to the possibility of space? And in particular, I have in mind the challenges that may exist that become barriers to all children having access to a STEM education, that include the work that we need to do to provide resources to teachers, the work that we need to do to address the fact that many schools in our country, be it in rural or urban communities, don't have technology. They don't have a lab. They may not have just the practical resources that are necessary to expose a child to the wonders of science and technology and engineering and math. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, for the question, but also for having the Department of Education at the table. This very important work. We are eager to advance the National Space Council's priorities by ensuring that every student in every community across the country can access a rich, rigorous, high-quality education that includes study in science, technology, engineering, and math. I know that Deputy Secretary Martin and others on the team are also engaged in this work and excited about this work. One of the biggest challenges we're seeing is that students, far too often, students of color and young women and girls, simply don't see themselves in roles of STEM. A recent survey of young people ages 13 through 29 found that students of color in particular simply didn't feel they had a place or a career pathway in STEM. And there's disparate access to STEM coursework in our schools. Only 50% of our high schools across the country offer calculus. And that number drops to 38% for high schools with high enrollments of Black and Latino students. It's unacceptable. As a nation, we can and should make STEM and space careers a possibility for every young person who has ever looked up at the sky and marveled. All students are STEM students. While we're eager to inspire the next generation of space explorers, we also need to expand STEM education and how it's defined and how it's delivered to more effectively reach a majority of students, including students who may not pursue a four-year college education. For example, welders are needed at NASA to build these rockets, right? And I'm sure the astronauts in the room appreciate a good welder. We're going to do this by working with states, industries, and communities to strengthen and diversify the continuum of STEM education from pre-kindergarten through college. For example, in partnership with NASA, the Department of Education currently supports the 21st Century Community Learning Center National Activities Funds to develop STEM design challenges for students in 3rd through 8th grade. These challenges are based on real mission data and experiences that occurred during human and robotic exploration of the solar system. We need to invest in these opportunities and expand who they're available to. At the post-secondary education level, the Department of Education is working with HBCUs like Hampton U and Hispanic serving institutions and the Minority Science and Engineering Improvement Program to bring STEM coursework to more students. We want these qualified, diverse graduates to come work for all of my colleagues around the table. So please, when they get out of school, hire them. Importantly, we must also invest in our teachers, especially our teachers of color who are preparing and inspiring the 21st century workforce right now. We want our students to see what they can be, to be competitive in the global economy. And as our country's population grows more diverse, the U.S. must catch up with other industrialized nations in STEM outcomes for our students and STEM career pathways for all communities. Education will get us there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And on the point of welders, I think we should go now to our Labor Assistant Secretary for Policy, Raj Nayak, who is there. And again, as with the Department of Education, we welcome as a new member to the Council the Department of Labor. I've talked many times with the Secretary about the work that you all are doing there. Can you talk specifically about the opportunities that we have in terms of collaboration with the private sector, with labor unions and others around the training, the apprenticeships for the important work of welders, electricians, and others.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice President, for your leadership in space and for good jobs. Secretary Walsh and Deputy Secretary Sue are very sorry to miss this chance to bring DOL into the conversation. They're on the West Coast today and this week engaging with port stakeholders on some supply chain and labor dynamics. But at the Department of Labor, everything we do is based on a worker-centered vision that starts with you and President Biden. Equity and job quality are at the center of the department's work. Our goal is to help connect workers to high-quality jobs that are accessible to people who are too often marginalized. We know the Department of Labor and the workforce system as a whole can play a key role in building and supporting a pipeline into the skilled jobs in the space arena as well. As you suggested just now and in your opening address, one great way to develop the next generation of skilled craftspeople in the jobs that you suggest, like welding, is to invest in registered apprenticeships, which is a proven workforce model and the gold standard of the job training system. We're focused on making registered apprenticeships accessible for workers across industries and backgrounds, focusing on workers who are making low wages, workers of color, women, workers with disabilities, veterans, returning citizens, and youth. Apprentices earn while they learn and get a pathway to well-paying careers and the ability to advance in those careers. And they're also an important lever for gender equity. For example, we have a registered apprenticeship program today at NASA's Langley Research Center focused on electrical technicians and mechanical engineering technicians, where nearly half the participants are women. This administration is working to expand those efforts to empower workers and help more Americans take advantage of quality training that leads to good union middle-class jobs while developing the workforce vital to the space industry. And the Department of Labor is really excited to be at the table for these conversations. So thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. And when we think about labor and the workforce, the federal government is, I think by many accounts, the largest employer in the country. And so that brings me to the Office of Management and Budget and the Deputy Director, Jason Miller, to talk a bit about how we can, within the federal workforce, attract and retain a diverse and a skilled workforce to meet the demands and the needs of our space agenda.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for that question. I think built into that question is a recognition that as a government, our single most important asset is our people, the dedicated public servants across all of our agencies, and something that you have charged us with, that the President has charged us with, is being a model employer. 2 weeks ago, on November 17th, we launched the Biden-Harris management agenda, and the first of our 3 priorities is strengthening and empowering the federal workforce. There is commitment across all of our agencies, across this entire administration and its leaders, to the principles and vision laid out within this agenda. One piece of that, something that many of my colleagues have covered, inspiring young people to STEM, inspiring young people to service. Stepping back, one of the challenges that we all recognize is that today, while we are the largest employer, our 2.2 million federal civilian workforce, less than 7% is under the age of 30. That's a problem that we need to tackle head on. We clearly need to do more. We have ongoing initiatives underway right now, including work across agencies to enhance diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and to bolster the national security workforce. Within those initiatives, we have a number of specific strategies to recruit and retain diverse technical talent. You heard about a number of those initiatives in the programs here today, including the talent necessary to achieve mission goals in our space programs. Things like collective efforts around paid internships, shared hiring actions for early career candidates, and something that I think we all need to do is enhance our HR capacity across the federal government. I believe we are poised as an administration to drive and coordinate implementation of these efforts under the governance structure of the Biden-Harris management agenda to realize that vision of the federal government as a model employer, to strengthen and empower our workforce. As chair of the President's Management Council, I am personally committed to making sure that we are doing everything in this space to deliver, strengthen our workforce, bring in more diverse technical talent, and make sure that we are an employer of choice, that those young children that Secretary Cardona talked about want to come to our agencies and know that the impact that they can have is powerful. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you very much. And our last panelist on this subject is with the Office of Science and Technology. She is the Policy Deputy Director, Dr. Alondra Nelson. And if you can talk a bit about how we can collaborate across civil, commercial, government channels in a way that is about recruiting a new generation of diverse and talented folks that can also see a pathway in their career for growth and for sustainability. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Vice President and Space Council members and all of you joining us. I'm delighted to be here to represent the Office of Science and Technology Policy and our Director, Dr. Eric Lander. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for your leadership and for your commitment to making STEM education and equity a core part of the work of the National Space Council. The United States is truly at an inflection point. The stakes are high, but the possibilities are endless, and we cannot afford to fail. It is crucial that everyone be able to participate in and contribute to science and technology because it's the bedrock of new scientific and technological insights. It's how America remains globally competitive, and it is the right thing to do. To keep leading the world in pioneering technologies, industries, and the jobs of the future, we need everyone on the team. We not only want to recruit technical talent from across all of America, we want to equitably support their ability to thrive and succeed in the next generation of space exploration. As we heard at OSTP many times over the last few months that we've engaged in our This Time Is Now roundtable series and a public ideation challenge, the crucial subject of advancing equity in science and technology includes providing early and mid-career support that meets the needs of scientists, technologists, and researchers from all backgrounds, including those with caretaking responsibilities, those from rural America, those with different functional abilities, and those at the thousands of community colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, and other minority-serving institutions that educate students that look like America. We look forward to building these and many other on-ramps and bridges alongside the policy councils and STEM agencies represented at this meeting to support the learners and innovators of the future. As this council well knows, the full complement of technologies we need to explore Mars, for example, do not yet exist. From suitable propulsion systems to generative technologies that can support in situ development of structures and food for extended visits, to robust human factors research, including equitable access to space and inclusive space governance norms that benefit all of humankind. By crafting a robust space strategy and a space STEM strategy that includes all and invites collaboration across federal agencies and with the private sector, including industry, philanthropy, and the American public, we can catalyze a paradigm shift in how we uncover the discoveries of tomorrow. NASA clearly has long pioneered successful STEM education programs and provides really a foundation for the work that we need to build on. And there's much more innovation that can take place in the space of STEM education. For example, there's an opportunity in bridging educational and national service initiatives, such as the establishment of scholarship for service programs that can help foster a new generation of leading scientists and technologists and engage them in the work of government. Or the creation of fellowship programs that offer bridging experiences across a range of civil, commercial, national security, and international space experiences, as well as our federal space research laboratories, increasing the sense of participation in our national affairs. Some of our most recent and successful planetary missions reflect our highest goals for ourselves, towards which we must continue to strive. Perseverance, curiosity, spirit, and opportunity. Indeed, now is the time, and this is truly our opportunity to position America's best resource, our people and their unparalleled diversity and excellence for success in the next generation of our space program. This is the work that OSTP is honored to do in partnership with all of you, and we look forward to working with the National Space Council under your leadership, Madam Vice President, to advance this work.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Nelson, and I will tell you that President Biden and I share a great level of enthusiasm about the work that is occurring out of the Office of Science and Technology, and please give our best to Dr. Lander. In conclusion about this panel, what has become apparent on each panel discussion is the need for coordination, but the overlap of interests as it relates to the work that we can do from the civil sector, from the commercial sector, from the government sector. And STEM, therefore, is no different. We need STEM across all of these sectors, and we have the capacity to actually work with these sectors to achieve our common goal, which is to increase the workforce, increase the skill set, and thereby increasing not only human capacity of those individuals who benefit from the education, but increase our nation's capacity to actually innovate. So to that end, I'm asking the Office of Science and Technology Policy to lead an effort to address two things in particular. One, how we can use space to inspire new STEM students, and two, how to identify how we can and how we must identify and then reduce barriers to entering and staying in the space workforce. So these are two of the charges that we have issued to the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and we look forward to the results of that work. The Space Council staff and the National Security Council have also agreed to examine existing and proposed STEM education initiatives, including specifically, and I'm particularly interested in this, the potential to modernize the National Defense Education Act in a way that we can develop a skilled space workforce to do a number of things, including strengthen our national defense. So we look forward to the work that will occur in that regard. With that, I would like to invite Admiral James Ellis to say a few words on behalf of the Users Advisory Group. The Users Advisory Group consists of commercial, academic, and other non-federal entities to provide the National Space Council advice on all matters of space. And Admiral Ellis, based on your experience having been the chair of the advisory group, I'd appreciate any words that you can offer in terms of your perspective on how the advisory group can support what we have discussed this afternoon.
Madam Vice President, Chair of the National Space Council, and distinguished members of this important body. I appreciate your giving me the opportunity to provide an update on the activities of your Users Advisory Group as you conclude this, your inaugural meeting. The Users Advisory Group was created by enabling legislation in order to provide an independent voice in the shaping of national space policy to all those who facilitate the use of space, employ its benefits, promote its security, or are inspired by the cosmos in all its dimensions. As we approach the end of our second term, it will not surprise you to see that much of what we have undertaken over these last 3 years matches many of the issues that you've highlighted in today's discussions. Our Exploration and Discovery Subcommittee has been primarily focused on reviewing and understanding the proposed lunar architecture for a return mission to the moon and the further objective of going on to Mars. The Economic Development and Industrial Base Subcommittee is focused jointly on the economic and security aspects of near-Earth operations, such as the International Space Station, and potential follow-on capabilities. We've also focused on the stresses imposed on the U.S. aerospace industrial base and its workers by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Technology and Innovation Subcommittee explored 3 focus areas: critical space technology roadmaps, space traffic management proposals, and the security of and confidence in both space-derived and space-related data. The Education and Outreach Subcommittee explored ways to improve our country's education system in support of continuing American preeminence in space. The subcommittee received input from across the field of education and training, with special focus on underserved communities, historically black colleges and universities, and STEM education-focused nonprofits. The subcommittee made several recommendations, including the addition of the Secretary of Education to the National Space Council, and we note with pleasure your recent actions to do just that. The Space Policy and International Engagement Subcommittee of the UAG explored how best to sustain and advance U.S. leadership in the global space enterprise by building effective and collaborative relationships among more than 100 spacefaring and space-reliant nations while at the same time recognizing that we must have policy guidelines and norms of behavior to deal with states that pursue a less aligned, extremely aggressive, or adversarial ideology. Finally, Madam Vice President, and as you and your council members have already noted, the national security and economic prosperity of the United States are inextricably linked to space. But the technological advances in and increased national security reliance on space systems must be matched by coherent supporting capabilities and clearly articulated national policies. The National Security Subcommittee of the UAG and other less public classified conversations offered what we believe were constructive refinements as the nation has begun to appropriately reshape its national security space organizations and capabilities. In closing, Madam Vice President, I want to thank you on behalf of all of the members of the Users Advisory Group for the opportunity to serve your National Space Council and for the support we have unfailingly received from the National Space Council Executive Secretary, now Chirag Parikh, and his team. I also want to publicly acknowledge the exceptional contributions over these past 3 years of our supporting NASA-designated federal officers, led by our UAG Executive Secretary, Mr. J.J. Miller. Finally, I especially commend to you the service of the 6 UAG subcommittee chairs, my full partners in this journey. Time does not permit me to list their names, but each of them gave generously of their time and talent to shepherd our collective efforts. They began as trusted colleagues and became true friends along the way, all of them exemplifying Gandhi's words that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Madam Vice President, the last few years have brought a new energy and a new vitality to the space community. We appreciate the focus that you and the National Space Council bring to our nation's role in space, and as an organization, we look forward to innovatively supporting your efforts as you confront both challenges and opportunities in defining the future of the nation's space enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Admiral. Well, we have concluded the business of this meeting, again, as our inaugural meeting with many areas of priority, 3 of which have been discussed this afternoon, but many more which we will discuss publicly and as a council over the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. I do want to thank all of the members of the President's Cabinet. You each take on so many challenges in these days of various priorities and crises, and yet you continue to innovate, you continue to see what is possible beyond the needs of a particular moment, but what we can do to invest in the future of our nation. And in your capacity of leadership, you inspire me. I think you inspire so many people, not only in your agencies, but in our country, about what we as the United States do in our role of leadership, not only for the people of our country, but the people of the world. And so I want to thank you each for the time that you and your staffs have put in to the framework that we are unveiling today and the commitments we are making going forward. And with that, we will conclude this meeting. I thank you all for being a part of this, and I look forward to our ongoing work. Thank you very much.